This is Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
One of my skis was sort of crawled on top of another one. And when your skis cross, a rule comes into effect called the Tandem skiing rule, which states if your skis are crossed and there's anyone in your vicinity, you are now allowed to hook them. Like the double-decker, just a single hard-shell taco wrapped by a soft tortilla. But here's the genius. In between, they put in refried beans to act as an adhesive. Like a... Right.
Some observational comedy there from Wayne Federman, Douglas Viviani here with David Cohen on Everything Old is New Again. The history of stand-up from Mark Twain to Dave Chappelle. Clearly a book that if you're interested in comedy, you need to get your hands on. There's a timeline even in there at the end of the book of comedy from the beginning to now. And it's just so interesting to see an art form that we have seen for so many years, and some people take for granted. You see it on TV all the time or wherever, and see it into a book and come alive in a book, so to speak, and be codified. It's a great read. The history of stand-up from Mark Twain to Dave Chappelle. Let's talk a little bit, Wayne Federman, about we spoke about Don Rickles a little bit a couple sections ago, and I wanted to mention him because in our world today, we're a little bit prickly, we're a little bit sensitive about things. And David had mentioned previously, we had a show about stand-up, we did a couple of them, and one of the points that I tried to make, and I don't know if this works, is that Don Rickles, yes, he was insulting, but he was insulting everyone, he was insulting everybody with sort of a wink. People that, went into the audience kind of wanted to be insulted, that was the audience at the time. And the whole point of it was, he even did it, to President Reagan at his inauguration. The whole thing is he wanted, I think, people to recognize, and I think the point of it was, he's joking around to show the absurdity of these stereotypes of these individuals that are out and about in the world, and I'm just trying to bring it to the nth degree to show you how ridiculous it is. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my interpretation of Don Rickles. And the second question would be, would he work today?
Maybe. I mean, it would be really hard because, here's a great example way audiences have changed, in that they would not accept, I don't think they would accept Rickles' absolute racial stereotyping and ethnic stereotyping of the Japanese and all of that stuff, black people, the whole thing. So, but in the same time, Rickles' audiences would be absolutely aghast at the use of the MF compound word and all of this stuff that happens comedy now. So it's just what people are sensitive to just changes over time. I can't imagine somebody could get away with what Rickles got away with. To me, the genius of Don Rickles wasn't the racial stereotyping, and that was the basis of the humor. The genius of Rickles was his lightning fast improvisations were years ahead of their time. Way past what Jackie Leonard was doing and the other insult comedians of the day. So that's why I adore that guy, and I think why young comics loved him, because he was like, oh, it's not like Rickles was speaking some great truth about humanity, but Rickles was using ethnic and racial stereotypes to launch this incredible improvisational mind, and it was just fantastic to watch. And I'm sure there might be somebody on Twitter right now who's going to go, Wayne Federman is a racist because he likes Rickles. Bring it on, because I just think that if that guy was to me, so funny, but I could understand why he would be offensive today. What do you guys think?
Well, I think if you're thinking he's offensive, then you're not in the day. You might be someone that's maybe in their 20s and wasn't back in the day. In that he was not, I think it's pretty obvious, wasn't serious about what he was saying. I think, as I said before, he was bringing it out to show, guys, what are we laughing at? And by the way, we're all the same. And he said it at the end of his show all the time. We're all the same. We're all human beings. We're all people. We're just, it's all this silliness of being so sensitive about all this stuff has got to go by the wayside. Otherwise, in the bigger picture, there can be no comedy, because then I guess all you're allowed to talk about is yourself, right? I mean, what else can you talk about if you can't talk about other people and interactions with other people? Because you're offending someone.
You are making a great point. We are in the era of self-comedy, where it's like you are the subject of your comedy act. And that's really And so you can't be criticized because you're talking about yourself. And I think it's also a way of deflecting the speech police that are out there now. So I don't know. I mean, I just feel like this is just goes in waves, and I assume eventually there'll be a guy who'll figure out how to do it. And yeah,
it'll be interesting to see what happens post-pandemic when there's live performances again and people want to be out there and they want to laugh. And I'm just wondering if they'll be a little more accepting of, maybe not a straight Don Rickles act, but something along those lines. Just because they're free and they're out and they're about and they want to have fun again.
I think so. I mean, again,
I hope so.
It's not for me to even judge what the average audience is going to like or not like. And also, comedy is very much like music now. There's there's rhythm and blues, there's jazz, there's rock, there's singer-songwriters. Like, that's comedy now. There's so many lanes you can pick. And I'm sure someone's going to pick a lane that's like a little more open to talking about racial stuff in a funny way. But I don't know. I mean, again, let's go back to the original thing you read out of my book, which was that it's generational. Like, for the people that went through World War II and all of that stuff, yes, Don Rickles was a perfect example of we're a melting pot. This is what America is. But now we're a little more tribal than we were back then. So the comedy is going to reflect that. I can't believe I'm talking seriously about comedy. It's annoying.
Yeah, this took a really dark turn. But, I'm wondering.
I know. Why'd you bring this up? I want to talk about Wally Bogue. Come on, man.
Well, I want to talk about for a second the idea that, exactly what you're saying is, Chris Rock goes one way with it. Kevin James goes another way with it in terms of blue, not blue, clean, whatever. Sebastian Maniscalco sells out Madison Square Garden. So your comedy is alive and well. Who is it that you feel today that could be, I don't know, I guess it's Sebastian in some way. You tell me somebody that when we get out of this pandemic is going to run with the ball and continue to sell like crazy, or are we starting from scratch?
I have no idea. I mean, certainly at the top right now, since he sort of stepped away because of that his situation of some offstage activities, I do think it's Bill Burr and Dave Chappelle, who's on the cover of my book, and certainly John Mulaney seems to be up there, and Jim Gaffigan is selling out places, and Kevin Hart, by the way, sold out a football stadium doing stand-up. Lincoln Financial Field, a football stadium.
Right.
So just think you saw something at Nassau Coliseum with Steve Martin? Could you imagine going to a football stadium? So those guys definitely. And then right below them, there's a whole crop of guys who are just ready to take it to that level. Obviously, Amy Schumer, I think, is an awesome arena act. I mean, my book's not a predictive book. It's a history book.
There we go. It is a history book. And David Cohen, I just having some fun here talking to you and to Wayne Federman. We're stepping outside of the box, so to speak, to let you know we taped this interview in every section this week. David and I will comment a little bit about this interview. We had a lot of fun with Wayne and David Cohen. I thought, like I said, I thought Steve Martin was a big thing. Now
apparently he's no Kevin Hart in Philly at a football stadium. I guess it wasn't as great as we were led to believe.
No, we're kidding around. The point is that he's right. How do you top Steve Martin at 18? 100%. Go to a football stadium with 50,000. That must have been unreal to see a comedian. I mean, think about, we talk about this and everyone thinks about this 18,000. That was 50,000 people. How could you pay attention? It wasn't a problem at the Coliseum. I'm so interested, though. 50,000 screaming and yelling. Could you hear him? What was the sound like and all of that? I'm sure it's had to be good this day and age.
I'm sure they had him up on those huge projection screens, so people can see him.
Right.
But, in some way, it's kind of weird, right? Because if you could really just see him, if you're up in the nosebleeds and you could see him on this giant screen, it's sort of like being at home watching him on TV, except you kind of know he's all the way down there,
right.
That little speck of a little bug-like thing.
But there is that one thing, though, I totally get that 100%. But when you're in a shared environment with other people and you're looking around, there's just that feel of humanity and the good nature. You know what I mean? Like that intangible that you feel in the air.
No, absolutely. Yeah, nothing can compare to being with the crowd. Plus, I mean, I've never heard 50,000 people laugh in unison.
Right.
I don't know if they did during that, but that would be pretty cool, too.
That's a great idea. And I wonder, walking out, what the attitude of all the people were. You bump into somebody, you step on somebody's shoelace and whatever. Does the fact that you just laughed together for 2 hours, whatever it was, eliminate all that nonsense of our day-to-day anger at other people, or being miffed at someone pushing into you for a moment or something? I think it would. I hope it would, but you think it only lasts a couple minutes?
Until you get back to the car and you're sitting in traffic again. Yeah.
You just laughed with this guy and had a great time for 2 hours, and you have a fender bender in the parking lot, and all of a sudden there's fisticuffs. I don't know.
Exactly. Next thing you know, right, you are right back in reality.
That's a real negative form of attitude. I would hope they would be different, but you're probably right. We'll be back after this. Everything Old is New Again to continue with Wayne Federman discussing the history of stand-up from Mark Twain to Dave Chappelle. You got to get this book.
Now, back to America's entertainment pop culture talk show. Everything Old is New Again with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
I liked the name Wayne until the fourth grade when my teacher was like, Wayne is also a word. I go, I did not know that. She goes, yeah, it's a verb. I go, what does it mean? Like to run or to play? She's like, oh, no. It means to diminish slowly over time. Are you ready to rock? No, Mr. Dockin, we're not. There's 12,000 of us here. We've been chanting your name for 20 minutes. We're wasted. We're here to do a roundtable on the Peloponnesian War. We thought, we don't need no education. Oh, yeah? Well, that's a double negative.
There you have a little more of the comedy stylings of Wayne Federman, if you will, our guest this week and last. He's the author of The History of Stand-Up from Mark Twain to Dave Chappelle, a tremendous book. David Cohen, you have a question? You're raising your hand here. Would you like to ask Wayne a question?
But Wayne, what about you? Do you have any desire to do stand-up again when you can?
Yeah. Of course, I already dates booked, but later in the year. Not really looking forward to playing like a third of a house with everyone in masks and like plexiglass between every table. That doesn't really appeal. You can do other things. As I said, I'm working on a documentary for HBO on George Carlin, so that's taking up some time. But yeah, I already have dates booked in Florida and Arizona, believe it or not, in November and December.
Awesome. That's great.
Thank you.
And we're looking forward to seeing you back here selling out the Nassau Coliseum, or at least the local governors or whatever it might be. Anywhere in between.
I don't know if I could sell out the brokerage. I don't know if I could sell at the brokerage.
Well, I tell you, this book might raise a few eyebrows, because when you're looking at and trying to figure out where did all this come from. I mean, that's what our show is looking at the foundation of what came before what we're seeing now, and that's what Everything Old is New Again is about, and been doing for 7 years, and this is a perfect topic for that. And I think obviously what you're saying is that. What came before needs, and let's take a look at it and see where it came from, so we can enjoy what it is today.
Can I make one quick point? Sure. Is that when the HBO specials came out in the late 70s, obviously Robert Klein did the first one and George Carlin did one in 77, but a lot, I listed in the purposely, Toady Fields did one, Myron Cohen did one. So there was like old school headliners were doing these specials. So I just want somebody who's reading the book like, I don't even know who these people are, and they were doing hour specials. So maybe they would be like, oh, there were comedians before Chris Rock came around. So that's part of it.
Yeah, I think it's important.
Pat Cooper was the name. I couldn't remember. Pat Cooper was the name. Right. Pat Cooper did one. You know what I mean? So these are comics. I don't know if they're legendary. I mean, they were big when I was a kid, so I just want them to know there was people doing comedy before.
Well, let me ask you, would this then lead into a sequel that would be these stand-up comedians that became movie stars in any way? Because or television stars in today's world?
Well, I talk about that in the book quite a bit, but you go back to Bob Hope, my old buddy from 1978. I mean, if you really think what made him great was not just the stand-up, not just the Pepsodent show on radio. It was those movies. The Big Broadcast of 1938. But there was actually a couple of movies, one called The Cat and the Canary and Ghostbusters. Ghost something. Wow, I can't remember the name of that. It can't be Ghostbusters, right?
No.
But anyway, The Cat and the Canary was the first one, these early movies, and he was just great in them. And that totally So totally elevated his career.
So I see behind you've got Martin and Lewis.
You see that? Can you tell what movie that is?
No, it's got to be an early one because they're wearing their suits.
They look very young. Yeah, in suits, right?
From 1952. It's called The Stooge, my favorite Martin and Lewis movie.
Wow.
Yeah, get a chance to see it. It's incredible.
They've done some great stuff. There's great movies. There's great stand up on all over YouTube and all. It does become dated and all that. The movies might sometimes be dated, but not necessarily. Yes, Wayne? Shocked at what I said.
Interesting. Like when you attack me, and then at the end of it, you're like, oh, it's like you're making my point that things become dated.
We were trying to end on a friendly note, Wayne. That's what it's all about.
I love it. I was under attack. At the end, he's like, guess what, Wayne? I agree with you. Okay.
Listen, you have to realize I'm an attorney, right? I got to play point, counterpoint. There's got to be some conflict. Otherwise, there's nothing to talk about, is there?
I love it. I love it.
Do the summary now and move on.
You were right all along.
I can be the foil. It's okay. I don't mind. Listen, I'm the foil.
I love it. I love it. I'm in my house. I'm sweating. I'm like, what is this? I didn't know it's going to...
Well, what do you usually...
F. Lee Bailey is going to take me apart here.
On the history of comedy. What, like, why isn't J. Fred Muggs in your book is another question, but no. Why in the world, what are you getting for questions from other shows? I'm curious, because we try to be a little different. Was it different? What do they usually ask you?
Oh, I love this show. Well, first of all, as you can tell, I'm like, by the movie posters behind me, like, I love old-time show business, but I actually love what's going on in stand-up today just as much. Like, I love what's happening in stand-up now. I think it's really exciting. There's different guardrails, like we talked about earlier. In the earlier generations, it was like, you couldn't say, damn. You couldn't say damn in vaudeville. You couldn't say slob. So think about that. Yeah. Think about what those guys... So, no, I can't get enough of it. I'm a radio and vaudeville, like, I love that era. Pre anything. I like actually pre-microphone comedy.
How about that?
The microphones come around in like 27. So, and like before then, I'm like, how are those guys doing it in the theater? How is Burt Williams getting these laughs? Like, I'm just fascinated by how it's even possible. Obviously, Twain is one of those guys.
And just to stand there and off the top of your head, well, it's not off the top of your head, but it seems to be off the top of your head, say things and tell stories and get laughs is got to be the one of the hardest things to do, or at least break into, out of all things. I mean, more than a lawyer and whatever. I mean, because there's no school for this per se, although it looks like USC's got a little bit of a head start on that. And Steve Martin's trying to do a master class in it. But, it's more or less like throwing you to the wolves when you start stand-up. You just go ahead, knock yourself out. Like they said to me at 17, when I had no experience about anything, but thought I could make people laugh. So just go on stage, just go do it. Like, oh, okay, huh? So it's just, you got to have the guts, right? I mean, all these comedians have got to have guts to be able to, like yourself, to be able to take this.
I don't know if I agree with that. There was, yes, I think during the nightclub era, you had to be like a puncher. You had to be like, those guys. Buddy Hackett. Yeah. But now there's like a comedian you should really check out named Maria Bamford, and she comes out of the alternative comedy school, and I don't think she could have survived in the what Joan Rivers had to go through to become a comedian. She's way too sensitive, but she is so funny and so interesting. And it's like, I would equate her to Jonathan Winters is what I would say, but through a sensitive little girl. She's from the Midwest. And she just does voices, and you're in her head, and she does her mom, and she's just so surprising and interesting and provocative and super clean. She doesn't do anything dirty, and it's just a real comedic savant. Maria Bamford is her name. So, and she's not like, it's not like, huge Amy Schumer level or something, but
definitely going to look that up. That's and see what she's doing, what she's going to do. Because listen, in all this time, all these things that's going on, there's nothing better than just sitting back and having a laugh for a couple hours in a club or whatever you're going to do on it. It's honestly, to me, there is nothing better. Which is the reason why it's amazing to be able to and have the capability of listening to Everything Old is New Again every week right here on your favorite radio station. Right, David Cohen?
Yeah, there's little sprinkles of humor here and there. If you listen long enough, you'll hear something remotely funny.
Exactly. Also something that might be weird. We have sometimes the aficionado of all things odd, Dr. Viviani, on. That's not such a bad turn of events sometimes. You like that new nickname we've given him?
Not really, but okay.
You don't like aficionado odd? What we used to say, the ufologist extraordinaire? There you go.
Yeah, I like that.
All right.
He's not odd. I don't find...
No, he's the aficionado of all things odd. So if there's something odd, he's an aficionado of it.
Yeah, I like the ufologist. I like that.
Okay, so we'll stay with that one for a while.
Let's stick with that.
And then there's also food eating contests we've had.
True.
We've done the hot dogs. We've done the hamburgers. We've done the what would you call it? I guess candy, we'd say. What would be
those
next?
food shows are great that we've done. I would definitely go back and listen to those.
We've got to get back to those. We've missed those a little bit during the pandemic, right? We haven't gotten, because David's in another location these days and for the last year.
That's right. That doesn't mean we can't do it remotely.
That's
right?
true, but you don't, like, if we're going to do cereal and I do 10 different cereals, you got to buy 10 different cereals.
I got to buy the same thing.
Yeah. So we
That's okay. What else am I doing?
All right. But would you do
What
it?
else am I spending my money? What's cereal now? It's $15 a box? 10 boxes? I can handle it. Well, I was going to say, our show is occasionally funny, but Wayne Federman's a very funny guy, and this was a funny show.
It was.
Because of that.
Yes, and that's why we're extending it to 2 weeks, because Wayne is really was a great guest. We hope to have him back. Let's be honest. We just hit the tip of the iceberg of all of this topic about the history of stand-up, which is
I think I told him this off the air, but he's like just one of those guys that when he walks on to a TV show you're watching or in a movie, you always get those people who are like, oh, that guy, he's so funny, right?
Exactly.
He's definitely right up there.
And you always know when he's going to, like I said, when he's going to come on the screen, he puts a smile on your face because you already anticipate and know that it's going to be funny. We'll be back. It's Everything Old is New Again with Wayne Federman. Barbecue guy here with Fondue guy. We're having a nice little barbecue here. Beginning of the summer. We got the pork loin. What do you think here, Fondue?
Well, thank you for inviting me, but I'm not big on pork loin. Do you have anything else, perhaps?
I'll tell you, I got this jar, these spiked cherries. They're bowls of fire, and also got the original kind from HowieSpiked.com. I'm going to use the au jus that's in there and pour it as a nice marination over the pork loin. We put the jar down here. You could try a cherry if you want. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, let me try one of those cherries, because it might be the only thing I can eat here today. Let's see. Right out of the jar. I like these.
Nice to see. I'm glad you see that. Glad you have it. You can eat it right out of the jar if you like. 10% alcohol. HowieSpiked.com. That's with 2 S's. HowieSpiked.com. All right. Fondue, I need the jar back. I got to use some more au jus on the steak here.
One check.
I need the jar.
Almost done.
HowieSpiked.com.
This is Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
One of my skis was sort of crawled on top of another one. And when your skis cross, a rule comes into effect called the Tandem skiing rule, which states if your skis are crossed and there's anyone in your vicinity, you are now allowed to hook them. Like the double-decker, just a single hard-shell taco wrapped by a soft tortilla. But here's the genius. In between, they put in refried beans to act as an adhesive. Right.
There you go. A little more stand-up from Wayne Federman, our special guest here on Everything Old is New Again. The history of stand-up from Mark Twain to Dave Chappelle. Tremendous book. Having a lot of fun off the air. We were talking a little bit again about David and I being at the Nassau Coliseum back in the late 70s watching Steve Martin. We never thought that he was going to be any kind of a show that people remember or anything, but Pete's music.
God, you were at Nassau Coliseum. I can't even. I'm still like. That's one of the most. That's a legendary show in the history of stand-up. It's like it's in the book.
Cool.
Yeah, it's like
We had Michael Elias on, who was working with Steve Martin and wrote some of that, or claims to have helped Steve Martin write some of that material and all. And he's
I know that guy. He wrote that book. Yep.
Yeah. And he was very complimentary and surprised as well. He was there that night and all that. And it was just amazing that we stumbled upon it. I mean, just because we lived. Do
you have the ticket stubs? Do you have how much it cost? Like, I'm so curious about that show.
The cost couldn't have been more than $5, David. What do you think?
Yeah,
if that was a lot.
maybe 10, if that.
Yeah. The T-shirt was $5. Put it that way, so it couldn't have been that.
I don't have the T-shirt, but I bought that also. It was one of those, black concert T-shirts, except it was.
Oh, they were selling stuff. Oh my God!
Through the head, and
It was unbelievable.
But then
I'm just saying, but 13 or whatever it is, 16,000 people walking out of the Coliseum. Just to finish my point is all of us had smiles on our faces. You'd bump into somebody. I know wasn't Shangri-La, but you know what? After 2 hours or an hour and a half, or whatever it was, of Steve Martin in a Coliseum walking out, it was it was just everyone was just happy is the bottom line, and that's what comedy does. I think, does it not? It's pretty obvious. I mean, it's silly.
Yeah, you think that exact thing happened at Sebastian's concert, or at Kevin Hart's concert, or at Bill Burr's concert. The exact same collective joy that whatever stand kind of does.
The lowest.
Bill Burr, he's pissing me off because he's a good actor too. That I don't like.
I know he's really good. He's very talented.
He's getting a lot of work, and he's really good. And
yeah.
So that's the thing, is that there's a common denominator with comedy that shows all of us that we can all get along, what we all want to do, and so forth, to be pie in the sky. But the point is, the history of stand-up shows you that history, shows you where it's coming from, where it's going. You talk about the pandemic, you talk about we're going to do outdoor concerts, you talk about what might be in the future and so forth. You're a little bit trepidatious a little bit in the book too about what might or might not happen. I think in terms of what's the future going to look like, for this immediate time.
Right. Yeah. I hate, but I don't like people that predict, because they're usually wrong. And also, people that predict tend to have an elevated level of certainty that I have no idea why they're so certain that they know the future. I mean, if they did, they would be living in Las Vegas and be multimillionaires, betting on sporting events. So I just don't know. I mean, I'm hoping that live stand-up, it'll be like a renaissance, and people will be so excited to be exactly what you described. I feel like you described it better than I could. That communal feeling of like, oh my God, what we all just experienced, this is incredible. And I feel like you can't even get that on a Netflix special, to tell you the truth, watching at home. I feel like that's it's like, I don't know, it's the same as watching the Rolling Stones in concert. It's just different than watching a film about the Rolling Stones.
It is, and it puts you through an experience, a shared experience that David and I have for the rest of our lives, so to speak, with, just that one example of the Nassau Coliseum, and we've 43 years later. I got that right, though, by the way. 43 years later, we're still talking and enjoying. David Cohen, you have anything else to finish off this one time that we're going to spend with Wayne Federman? We're going to definitely invite him back.
Just hoping he comes back, because I'd love to get into your experience doing stand-up.
Okay,
and what you went through, and because I know the short time that I did it, that the feeling on the other side, right, when you get a big laugh, and how like energizing and how like good it feels that you have that impact on people. So that among other subjects, love to have you come back.
I'd be happy to talk about Wayne Federman. Love it.
Who wouldn't?
Thank you. Okay. Is there anything? Do I need a sign-off thing?
We're going to say thank you very much, Wayne Federman. Everybody else listening, stick around, because we want you to go to Amazon right now and pick up The History of Stand-Up from Mark Twain to Dave Chappelle. It's a tremendous book. I'm telling you, you're going to enjoy it. I don't recommend things I don't read myself and don't enjoy. It's the exact opposite. This is a great book. Going to get the summer coming up. You're going to really enjoy Wayne Federman's point of view on the history of stand-up and more. And we're going to continue right here, and more on Everything Old is New Again, is what we're trying to say. And listen, that was an amazing time. We had a great time with Wayne Federman. David Cohen, going into this interview, I know we were saying you knew Wayne Federman. You could look up his comedy routines on YouTube. You could see, him on Curb Your Enthusiasm and a million shows. And he always puts a smile on your face. Did you feel... the pressure, so to speak, coming back from him. In other words, he was saying we challenged him right from the beginning on his thesis that stand-up comedy is not timeless, and then we came full circle.
And just to clarify, by we, you mean you.
Yeah, that's right.
I had nothing to do with that.
Well, exactly right, because I still find comedy timeless, but I'll have to qualify because he might be right about this. I think he is right about the stand-up comedy. The one
I think
person
he made a good point, right?
Because that's a lot of many times that's topical and is about the time that you're in. But the comedy teams, I think, is a little different, and certainly comedy movies is different. But that's a totally different subject than stand-up comedy. So I think going into this kind of putting them all into one box and saying
you were too broad. They're definitely different art forms, so they're hard to lump all together.
But I could watch. I mean, you just go to YouTube if you feel like doing this instead of watching the whole movies. But there are W.C. Fields routines that I still can watch to this day, but they're in the movies. The one where he's trying to sleep on the outside on the porch. Have you seen this?
Yeah.
I mean, it just I could watch that and laugh to this day, but 100% it's not stand-up comedy. Right. So I think it's a point well taken, but you have to have something to go in and sort of chew you
have a topic to talk about. Yeah,
exactly.
No, of course.
So I think it worked pretty good.
Is this book the history of stand-up comedy or the history of comedy?
Stand-up comedy. So listen.
So that's where your theory just
But I don't mind being pointed out that I was wrong. I would prefer to have something that we talked about that gets your blood boiling than just go through the motions and talk about the same old thing.
You got his blood boiling. That worked.
I hope it didn't offend. I think he took it in a good way, and I think he's certainly has a good sense of humor, of course.
Yeah,
so I think he took it right. But the book is really something because how did he research it? Like that's another. I mean, I guess I could have looked into that a little bit, because to research Mark Twain and all these people from the beginning of the days of comedy and Buster Keaton, and I mean he goes all the way back to the late 1800s to look at Artemus Ward and Burt Williams and Will Rogers. Of course, there's a few recordings of Will Rogers, yes, but for the most part, he's now trying to, even in the book, there's recordings of most of the comedians that are a little more, let's say from the 30s on. But the question is, how do you translate that to a book? He doesn't try to give you the comedy routines in the book. He's giving you the history and the background of where these people came from and how they fit in. Does that make sense?
Yes. So
it's much more interesting than that. He's not just going to try to tell you, did you hear the one about this that Eddie Murphy talked about? It's a better read than that, for sure. It's amazing.
Are there certain references to comedians where you say to yourself, oh, I got to go look that up. I want to hear this person. I want to hear that person.
100%. He will list just about any and every comedian you can think of. And in fact, he doesn't talk about comedy teams. He does exclude comedy teams from his discussion. But while he does so, he does mention, of course, Abbott Costello, but he mentions our favorites, Wheeler and Woolsey.
How do you like that?
He does talk about Wheeler.
Someone else confirming that they existed.
They did exist in the parallel world. Go back and listen to the old show, two shows on Wheeler and Woolsey. I think those were great shows. They were very interesting with the guests we had there, and it was just the expert on Wheeler and Woolsey, a comedy team from the 30s that you've probably never heard of. That were very famous
and weren't that funny, but were highly successful without anyone realizing it,
right?
Or at least without us realizing.
Exactly. I'd love to hear what Wayne Federman has to say about Wheeler and Woolsey. Let's come up with some additional topics to ask him about in our next section on Everything Old is New Again, right here. And if we have Wayne back, what do we want to talk to him about? We'll be back. Right after this, and Everything Old is New Again.
Thanks for the memory of sentimental verse.
This is Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Wayne, before I give you our outro here, I just want to tell you that you're one of my favorite comedians that I've ever seen ever, and I'm just so honored and lucky that I got to hang out with you and work with you. I really am a giant fan of yours, dude.
That's incredible. I love the way the audience burst into spontaneous applause when you said that. That felt good.
You're waiting for it.
There we go. We are applauding here on Everything Old is New Again. Wayne Federman recently on Jimmy Fallon, following up on his appearance with Everything Old is New Again. Let's be honest, Fallon is following our leads wherever we go. So,
He's always, anyone we book, Fallon's got him the next week.
Yeah,
Come on.
It's amazing.
Can't you book your own guests, Jimmy?
But who asks better questions? Who gets them rolling? That was a love fest, as it should be, for the book.
Yeah, look, we're not sycophants. We're not sucking up to anybody here. We like Wayne Federman too, but we're not going to be all drooly all over the guy.
Yeah, we did mix it up with him a little bit, had some fun. He enjoys the banter back and forth. Again, Wayne Federman, The History of Stand-Up, from Mark Twain to Dave Chappelle. Amazing, great book. The only book you're going to read about the history of stand-up. I don't think any out there, and this could set a tone, could be the next thing, because Federman could then go into the history of comedy on television, the history of comedy on radio, the history of comedy in the movies. Am I wrong? The history of comedy teams. There's 4 books right there he's got to do. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I think we should have him back and go over those options with him and how we can get cut into this.
Exactly. We came up with this. We're going to call it a unique idea. It certainly isn't, but we'll say it is. We've announced it first right here on Everything Old is New Again. The unique idea of those books. So we're the driving force behind those books. Maybe we could do the introduction. Maybe we could get a thank you. Maybe we could. I think the closest we're ever going to get to being involved with a best-selling book, which I'm betting the history of stand-up is going to be, and these others that we follow up on, the closest we're ever going to get is buying those books. I think that's...
You're probably right.
But we could try. We could really dig and try to get maybe just a nod somehow. Well, we're lucky we get another interview. Let's put it that way. We're happy.
Yeah, we'd be very lucky.
Yeah. So
the way you try to put him in his place and failed miserably. Yeah.
It really wasn't intentional. I thought it was just an innocent. I really did thought it was just an innocent way to start the conversation.
Yeah. You had a theory, and which was that his entire basis for his whole book was completely wrong. And he refuted you. I think, did it in an admirable way that kind of cut you down to size.
Well, he wasn't trying to.
It was very good.
This book doesn't try to prove the thesis that stand-up comedy is stuck in its time, so to speak, though that does certainly come out throughout the book. Like it's a very interesting point he made about Lenny Bruce.
I see. So you're still getting into it with him. He's not even here.
It's the only way I can win the argument. Let's think about Lenny Bruce's discussion of Lenny Bruce. I think is very interesting because when we grew up in the 60s and 70s, we heard, and then there was the movie, I guess, in the late 70s, early 80s about Lenny Bruce with Dustin Hoffman. Right? He was so controversial. As kids, we couldn't listen to him. We sort of didn't know what it was all about. We certainly couldn't go to the clubs. So we were in a sort of the dark. But now when you listen to his tapes, they have tapes you can go on YouTube and listen to of Lenny Bruce. Have you done this? Is the first question.
Not recently, but I have, yeah.
Yeah, and what is your impression? Because I sort of have an impression myself that's, I don't know. I'll hold it back for a moment. I don't want to ruin it.
I think it's a sort of thing, I hate to use this expression, but you kind of had to be there at the time in the 60s when this was happening and kind of understand what the club scene was like back then and what was allowable and not allowable. So I don't think I can ever really appreciate what he did, whether I thought it was just funny listening to it. I mean, some of it was, yeah, but I don't think I just find myself listening to it and saying I probably would have, understood or appreciated this more at the time.
Yeah, it was more of breaking through the walls, and I'm not. This is not fair, but Dice Clay was somewhat broke different walls down when he did his thing. Remember,
right.
And it was a huge hit for 2 years or something, and every college kid was playing his album left and right like crazy, and Hickory Dickory Dock and all that stuff, and
and he had a shtick. He was different,
but no one listens to it now. So there's Federman's point of view is exactly right. Both of those broke through barriers, but the actual comedy itself may not have been that funny unto itself. That makes sense.
It just didn't stand the test of time.
Yeah. Which, again, proves me wrong about stand-up, and Wayne Federman correct. So in honorarium, how do you say that? In honor of Wayne Federman, I will acknowledge that my thesis isn't 100% correct. And again, I started to bring up radio, and he's right when I talked about Jack Benny. Yeah, I never saw Jack Benny do stand-up. He did his monologue in the beginning of a show, but that's not necessarily stand-up. Now, talk about stand-up and old-timers. I never really listened to, or I should say laughed, with Bob Hope. His movies, yes. His stand-up, no. David Cohen, what about you?
Yeah, listen, when we were growing up, Bob Hope was just like this old fogey guy that was in these funny movies, and I never really liked the movies. I never got him, and then one day, oh gosh, this is back... This is even a long time ago. It was in the, I guess, the late 80s, maybe early 90s. He did a stand-up set where my brother was going to college, George Washington University down in D.C., and my parents were down for the weekend, and somehow we got tickets to see Bob Hope at this very, very small, theater at George Washington University, and we went to see him, and I have to admit, I laughed a lot during his set. I thought it was a really, really good stand-up set, and I was surprised at how much I was laughing.
And we did a show on the Oscars, and this is just a little peek into it. You can listen back on everythingoldisnewagain.biz and look for that show on the Oscars. We did a couple of clips of him. I think he was the first host, or a couple of times he hosted the Oscars in the beginning. When he was young and contemporary, listen, the man had a huge career for a reason. He was funny. He did the right thing. I think it's a good example of just, a different generation. But when you get into that generation, when you're live with someone and spending the 2 hours with that person, it's a whole different feel. And like you said, think about it. You were a college kid, or yourself or your brother was. Let's just say you were early 20s, and you were listening to probably a 79-year-old man on stage, and he was making you laugh for 2 hours. Yeah, that's an amazing tribute, isn't it? I think.
But you're right. I think you're bringing up a good point. Especially with comedy, it's a different experience when you're there in a club or you're watching someone do it live. It's very different than sitting and watching in the comfort of your own home because, like you said, there's the shared experience of being in the club. There's that feeling of camaraderie. You're rooting for the comedian to be funny. You want to laugh. You want to have a good time. And when you see instantly that this person, he or she, is funny from the get-go, you're just... you just want to go along for the ride, So, yeah, I think seeing Bob Hope on TV versus seeing him do his thing live were two completely different experiences, and I appreciate it a lot more. And that's kind of what I was saying about Lenny Bruce, too, where that stuff, maybe it's a different subject because I think the Lenny Bruce argument is that it just doesn't stand the test of time. But I think with Bob Hope, it's more about just being there with him, and I think that's why people loved him.
Well, there's another point of view, too, is I'm saying 2 hours. I don't know how long he was on stage, but he had a certain period of time with you there to engage himself with you, to develop the rapport, to develop the relationship between audience and let's say, comedian, And when he's doing his 3-minute routine before he introduces an act on a variety show, it's a totally different thing, you know what I mean? It's 3, 4, 5 jokes, and then they're going on to whatever. You're going to spend an hour and a half with somebody, you're invested, And I agree with you. When we used to watch all these comedians at East Side Comedy Club in Huntington, New York, we as kids were 17 and 16 and 18, and there were times where comedians, number one, great comedians, no audience, you have 5 people laughing, but it's not the same as 55 or 105 people laughing, right? It could be the same comedian, but it's not the same experience, number one. Number two, we had many comedians up there that were poor, just trying their stuff, and we want to try to laugh and try to support them, and then after a while you go, I'm going to the bathroom. I'm going to take a break for a minute. It's so embarrassing.
Yeah, but we also saw a lot of them trying new material a lot, too.
Absolutely.
Which is very, very experimental. And, look, a lot of times it just doesn't go over very well. And you just kind of pick the little bits of the seeds of ideas that might have gotten a response, and you go with that. But when you're just doing new material for the first time, sometimes it's hard to listen to in the audience, even if you do want to kind of laugh along.
Right, but it developed our, I don't know what you could say, if it developed our sense of humor or added to it, or I don't know. I think kids today miss so much. It was a special time to say, we did this probably 15 times, no, maybe more through the years. We would just get dates or just go ourselves to the comedy club and watch comedian after comedian. We did it a lot. So at 17, kids can't get in a car and do that now at 17. There's no place to go. Forget the pandemic. Before all that, there's no place to go. You wouldn't be allowed in with the drinking and all this stuff.
Wasn't there didn't they have a ladies' night on Friday night?
They had a ladies' night.
So we would go, after ladies' night ended, we would go to East Side Comedy because we figured, hey, it was all ladies before, and they were laughing, having a good time. Now they want to meet. They want to meet people.
Yeah.
Why not us?
We did meet them.
We found out why not us, but at the time we thought, why not us?
Yeah, we met them as they said, "Excuse me," and went to the coat check room and got their jackets, and on the way out they went right past us.
Yeah, but we had some great conversations while they were walking out. I remember those.
We will continue our great conversations next week, and everything old is new again. And again and again, you've got to read this book, The History of Stand-Up, from Mark Twain to Dave Chappelle. Wayne Federman. We'll welcome him back whenever he likes. Hopefully he will come back, and we'll be back ourselves next week, and everything old is new again.